Hey, Dan here. It's a beautiful day just outside Zurich, Switzerland. I'm visiting a friend here who's running an ultra marathon in September. One of those huge goals. He's actually an ENTP, and like us ENFPs, needs a huge goal to keep himself, motivated and excited about life. And so he invited me down to train with him for like a week. I've been getting back into running a lot as well, so run through the mountains. You can see here behind me. Not quite the Alps, but beautiful, beautiful place to spend some time. Very quiet. I have about a 20-minute walk to the closest grocery store or cafe to work from, which is what I'm doing now. I wanted to make a video about ENFPs and anxiety because, well, anxiety sucks. And I don't think people necessarily realize how much anxiety can throw them off track. In fact, sometimes what we think is ADHD, and it could be related to ADHD, but what we think is a struggle with concentration, where we think, oh, this is related to having ADHD, that's why I can't focus. And many times it's actually more related to anxiety. And if you have this behavior where sometimes you can't get into the flow of what you're supposed to do, focus and work, and you find yourself distracting yourself a lot, where you're you're supposed to sit down and get your work done, but you watch YouTube videos. Not this one, this is a great one, but other ones. Or you're playing games, or you're just generally trying to distract yourself. Sometimes that's actually more of a reaction to anxiety than it is something like ADHD or an inability to focus, because you feel sort of anxious in the morning. And I wanted to cover a couple tips and just different things with that I thought might be helpful. It won't be a full comprehensive video, but share what I've learned both when I was doing this a bit more professionally. Actually, my first book dealt with some aspects of social anxiety and things in this realm, but also what I've just found with myself as well. Can we do this? Can we do a switch? Look at this beautiful spot here. All right, so anxiety. First thing I would look at, if you do think anxiety's messing with you to some extent, is look at what could be physiological things. So something like you drink too much coffee in the morning, you're going to feel anxious. And our brains are really annoying, where when they feel something like anxiety, they look for a psychological reason for it. So if you're feeling anxious, believe it or not, your brain is going to be like, why am I anxious? And rather than be like, oh, probably because I drank 3 coffees this morning, which is the more obvious reason, your brain is more likely to go to the fact that, oh, well, maybe it's about this project, or maybe this thing, or this other thing happening. Because your brain's trying to justify it, right? We want to find out, why do we feel this way, right? It's the reason we have our pain system. You feel a pain and you're like, oh, did I cut myself? Did something happen? Did I break a bone? It's a notification system, and anxiety is the same thing. It's a notification system. So if you start feeling anxious, you will often come up with reasons or find reasons to justify it, which will then actually create more anxiety, because now you're thinking about all those things that are making you anxious, that you thought are making you anxious, but really it's just because you had too much coffee, or you didn't sleep well, or something else, right? So definitely look at physiological reasons as a starting point, but not as an endpoint. So that is the first thing to look at. Now, assuming you've ruled out some basic physiological things, you haven't had 20 espressos this morning, then you want to look for the actual cause. As I said, anxiety is a signaling system, right? It's trying to tell you something. It's your brain saying like, hey, you should watch out for this, right? So if you identify what is actually causing the anxiety and then take it on, you're not going to feel as anxious, right? And this happens, you probably know this, if you have these things going in the back of your mind and then you write it down like, hey, tomorrow, deal with that bill I need to pay. Your brain stops thinking about that bill, or at least thinks about it less, because you've dealt with the thing. You're feeling anxious because part of your unconscious is trying to bring it up to you and say like, hey, dude, there's something you need to do. So I'm telling you so you don't get in trouble, right? So often anxiety is a positive signaling thing, and that's why you don't want to numb it. If you start numbing the anxiety either through drugs or distraction, you create more problems. You start avoiding the things the anxiety is telling you to deal with, and you get more and more problems, and then you need more and more numbing and more drugs and more whatever. And then next thing you know, you're, in a really dicey situation. So you want to figure out what is the thing that is signaling you. I'm going to go check out over here. So what is that thing that you're being signaled about? And the first thing is thinking about repetitive thoughts. So just in the last few days, I've dealt with something, just a simple admin thing, a bill I needed to pay for internet on an apartment I haven't lived in 4 years. Other people were living there. They didn't pay the bill. It's a whole annoying thing. And this has been in the back of my mind. Like, I actually thought, how much do I think about this? And there were some late fees and some things I wanted to dispute. I obviously preferred that the tenants paid the bill, not me. But I ultimately realized I'm thinking about this a couple times a week, and I'm pretty sure it's causing some kind of underlying anxiety. Like, over and over, I keep thinking about it in small doses. So screw it. I'm just going to pay the bill, pay the late fees. I don't care. Like, my headspace is worth it to free this up. So you want to think about, like, what are those practical things that you keep thinking back to? Maybe there's a conversation you're avoiding where you keep thinking about, oh yeah, I need to fire this person or have a difficult conversation with a family member or whatever. Those things running in the back of our minds cause all sorts of problems. Remember, ENFPs, we have a great imagination, basically, right? And we can generate ideas and situations very easily. So if there's something that we're not dealing with, like a conversation, where an ENTJ might avoid a conversation for a bit and just be like, yeah, I'll deal with it. I'll tell them, it'll happen. We're like playing that scenario over and over. Like, what if they say this? What if they say that? Often, this isn't every ENFP, thankfully, but for many of us, and I'm one of these people, I go worst case scenario. Like, I am assuming the conversation will not go well. I'm assuming something bad will happen. I'm, playing that out. And think about the damage that's doing to your mind when you're overall, like, you're thinking about the scenario that hasn't happened and all the bad things that will happen, and you're playing that out over and over every day instead of just, having the conversation. Or if you can't have the conversation immediately for any number of reasons, then one is schedule it so you get it out of your head, write it down somewhere. And the second thing is visualize it going well. Because what's happening is your imagination is projecting this conversation in the not so positive light. So now you're thinking, this is going to be horrible. But if you schedule it, say, hey, next week I'm going to talk to Bob. Then take a few minutes and you just close your eyes and you imagine the conversation with Bob going really well. And Bob is like, I love you. This is the best conversation ever. Then you're going to quell that anxiety and you'll be surprised how well this works and how much better you can feel about it all. Now, what if you're not sure what is causing that anxiety, right? This can happen for a few reasons. One of the reasons is that we just really block the thing. So maybe it's like, yeah, I've been at a job I hate for 10 years, or I want to kill my spouse. Like, if I have to deal with my husband one more day, I'm going to go nuts. And so we will not want to directly address it because we know, hey, if I actually directly address this, it means I have to quit my job or get a divorce or something like that. So sometimes it's buried in that way, and sometimes we just don't know because there's a lot of things going on. Something I learned that I found really, really helpful. There's a problem with the word anxiety. The first is that it's used as a bit of a catch-all and can be associated with something that's purely physiological, right? Oh, I'm feeling anxious. But it's become a thing where people treat anxiety as the cause or the issue, and it's not, right? Anxiety is a signaling mechanism. Anxiety is telling you something else is going on you need to deal with. So when you ask yourself about, like, why am I anxious? What's going on? Sometimes your mind is like, I'm anxious because I feel nervous, or, I'm anxious because I'm doing too much. It doesn't give you a really helpful answer. So something I learned is to ask the question, what am I afraid of, or what am I angry about? And when I first got this bit of advice, and this was in a personal situation, I got this advice, I was like, yeah, I think a lot of the time anxiety is actually about, too much coffee or this or that. And the person challenged me. They're like, just try this, okay? Most of the time, anxiety is not coming from some, random physiological thing. It's actually something going on in your unconscious. Now, granted, they were psychoanalysts, sorry. So their whole worldview is everything's tied to your unconscious. But I'm like, I'm going to give this a try. And they were right. Almost every time, if I'm feeling anxious, I ask myself, what am I scared of? Or what am I angry about? I come up with something. And when I address that, either through scheduling a time to deal with it, dealing with it right away, or visualizing and kind of thinking about it and saying, oh yeah, that's actually not so bad. When I actually deal with it, the anxiety goes away. So what am I afraid of? Because ultimately, that's what anxiety is. It's signaling that you need to do something to deal with something that will potentially be bad for you. And we now like to use these words like, there's the, I was saying to someone the other day, there's like the post social media, everyone's a pseudo-psychologist. Someone was telling me recently that they were bullied in high school for being an attention seeker. And I'm like, we did not use terms like that. Like, that's a very specific, like basically the other students were like psychoanalyzing her and being like, you seek too much attention through your actions. And it's this thing where, you know, everyone's watching videos and learning a little bit about psychology here and there and trying to label everything. And you hear this with young people. Everyone's like, I have anxiety. And it's this thing. And that's probably true, but you're going to solve it much better. You're going to be able to deal with it by really addressing what's there. And at the core of anxiety is fear or anger. And so if you address that, what am I scared of? What am I angry about? Get a little more raw and a little more real, because anxiety is a bit of an excuse as a term, right? It's like, I don't want to say I'm scared, because scared is a weak emotion. I don't want to say I'm angry, because you're not allowed to be angry anymore. So it's like, oh, I'm just anxious. But anxious is this really generalized catch-all symptom that can mean everything from the fact that you haven't paid a bill, to you need to quit your job, to there's a bear standing behind you. Like, you know? And so it doesn't really help you that much to just describe it as anxious. So ask yourself those questions. Remember that ENFPs, we can be very free-spirited and happy and easy-go-lucky and all those things, but we also have the wiring to be very ambitious, to be very challenge-oriented, and because of the way we're set up, to also end up experiencing quite a lot of anxiety. So if you do feel anxious, don't feel like there's anything wrong with you, that you know, you're not a good ENFP or anything else. It's a matter of just taking some proactive, strategic approaches to handling it, and then getting back on with your fun-loving, change the world selves. Thanks for watching this. If you're new to the channel, of course, subscribe. I publish new videos whenever I sort of feel like it, somewhere between once a month and once a week. What I've been doing for the recent little while is when I have something that maybe comes up when I'm talking to another ENFP or leading a group coaching session or something that I think will be valuable, I share it here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video soon.